Thanks for tuning into Building Blocks. I'm your host, Adam Chai. Today, I'm super excited to interview Mike Whaling, who is the founder of 30 Lines, which is a massive apartment marketing and technology company. They've got some really cool digital products like RentPress, which lets you run apartment-style websites on WordPress and all that sort of thing. But the reason I'm interviewing him is centralization is a topic that's gotten a lot of attention on the leasing side of things for the last couple of years. And Mike has been very vocal about centralizing your marketing efforts, which can be easier operationally than centralizing leasing. Of course, the holy grail is marrying both of those, but there are a lot of quick wins that people don't realize that you can get from centralizing marketing. And one of Mike's clients, which he shares his data on the call, saw a 40% improvement in their cost per lead from marketing by centralizing marketing alone. And it was just a matter of not competing with each other on the same Google keywords, making it more efficient and renter friendly. And I pick his brain on this call as to why people are not doing this today. What are the first steps that you can take to move towards a centralized leasing strategy, which right now is super important given how every marketing dollar is on the chopping block with budget season. And I hope you enjoy it. Mike, thanks so much for hopping on the pod.
Hey, thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. You know, centralization is something that over the last 2 years, if you're listening to this podcast, you've probably heard it a million times. And everyone's talking about centralizing leasing. But from my perspective, and Mike, you can correct me if I'm wrong about this, it feels easier to centralize marketing because it's less of an operational lift. From my perspective, it seems like a lower operational lift to centralize your marketing, and you can like 2, 3, 4x how far your marketing spend goes. So, my question is this just shiny object syndrome? Or are we just like dangling the centralization leasing carrot and everyone's like, forget about centralizing marketing. Like, let's just centralize leasing.
Well, there's a lot there, right? That's an hour conversation at least just with that question.
Yeah.
I think we have to look at it two ways. One is centralized marketing from the perspective of the marketing team and the bandwidth that they have available. And then there's centralized marketing from the experience as a renter and as a shopper. And what does that look like, right? And I think if we look, we can go down both of those paths. But if we start with the renter and we look at how renters shop, very rarely do they start with an individual property in mind. They start with, I'm moving across the country for a new job, and I need to figure out, a lot of those folks are starting with what are the best neighborhoods in Chicago. And then if I'm maybe across town, I know I want to be in the neighborhood. Hey, I want to be in Streeterville. I want to be in River West. And then you start with those types of like unbranded terms. There's a segment of the audience that goes, I drive by that building every day and that's the place that I want to live. But that's rare, right? Like that's not a big piece of the audience. So first of all, the first thing we want to think about is how do we make it easier for our marketing team to reach those folks that don't know us by name yet? And the way that we do that is by providing options, by providing content that helps them in those initial stages of their search, and how do we be the best answer to those questions of really cool apartments in River West? And that typically is a great opportunity for you to present multiple options, multiple properties. Hey, we've got 3, 4 properties in this neighborhood or within a mile. Let's talk about what you're looking for, and let's see if we can't set you up with a tour at 1 or 2 of these properties that might be a good fit. That is a much better shopping experience that is more aligned with how people are shopping and what they're what they're ready to do versus me, come see my property. And then you're doing the exact same thing with your other 3 or 4 assets that are in the same neighborhood. And what we see is in a lot of cases, all of those properties are competing not only against all your comps, but they're competing against each other for the same PPC keywords, the same placements in ILSs, the same placements in organic search. They're all competing against each other on the Google map. And what we want to do is look at how do we make life easier, and how do we give the marketers some tools and approach and some strategies that they can move forward so that they can 3, 4, 5x their results by actually aligning with how shoppers actually shop.
Right. And I think a lot of people will put the burden on the leasing agent and say, oh, well, this prospect said they have a $1,600 a month budget, and that is too cheap. That's too low for your property. Why didn't you refer them down to our other property? But that's a little bit of an unreasonable expectation. I'm sure some great leasing agents can make that connection and go, oh, great, let me refer you over to our sister property. That's literally $200 cheaper than us and will be more likely. But there's so much work you can do for the user to already show them those options. They can make that decision themselves and just save them that time. And if you're bidding on those keywords, like you took them on one journey, you didn't even let them see the other products you have, and
Right.
you're kind of just wasting that budget for no reason.
Let's use an analogy for what you just said. You're like, basically what we do and what we see in a lot of cases is we wait too long for the renter, for the shopper to raise their hand, and then we're expecting the leasing team to do all that work that you just described, right? So instead, if like, think about that in a retail environment. Someone walks into Banana Republic and they look around and they're looking at all the clothes, and then they go, things are a little too expensive. Are you expecting that retail clerk to then go, oh, well, if you want something cheaper, you can head over to our sister property at the Gap or Old Navy? It's all the same family. That's not the experience. That's not what that person is trained to do, and that's not what the way that they think about it. But if you can build the brand, and if you can have that approach to go, hey, here's our whole family of what we have to offer. If you're looking for something a little more upscale, here's our brand over here. If you want something a little more everyman, or a little more affordable, then here's our option over here. That is perfectly that's a perfectly reasonable way to approach it. That car companies approach it this way with Toyota, Lexus. Lots of other brands, lots of other industries approach it this way. I do think that there's an opportunity there for us to say, have that regional approach to go, hey, you searched for best apartments in near downtown Columbus. Cool. I'm going to show you that we have 5 options. At that point, all I want to do is get a little bit of information about what you're looking for, and then we can start to have a nurturing conversation.
So let's say we all agree on the user journey, because I think that's something that will probably be easy. I think that's something that actually, if you're a marketer and you're pitching leadership, I think they'll agree with you because they've rented an apartment before. Likely, they've likely rented an apartment before, and they've gone, yeah, I started with a location, and then I narrowed down 5 options, then I narrowed it down to one property, etc. So let's say you have that pitch nailed. What are the reasons that people are telling you, Mike, oh, this is why we can't do this? Because there's a reason that our industry hasn't shifted to centralized marketing already. Like, what are some of the most common reasons?
Yeah, I mean, one, I think, is operations. And we are certainly, with centralization and specialization of roles, we certainly are seeing that more people are willing to reevaluate their operations and whether it makes sense or not. But certainly, in the past, when all of the leasing efforts were at the property level, it was really difficult to find. Some organizations would have what people have called like a floating leasing agent, right?
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of organizations weren't set up with the right people in the right seats to be able to approach this. The other big challenge is, there's really 2 other ones. One is software. Every CRM system in our industry is built for, I can't even receive a lead unless that person tells me what property that they're interested in. There's one CRM that I know of that can receive a lead that's not attached to a property. And so there's some gaps there in the software, and then the workflows that come through that. And the other one is just, this is an asset centric business, right? Every asset is its own LLC, has its own set of investors, and in a lot of cases is branded separately and has its own marketing plan. And what we see is, that is completely opposite from how people shop. So what we have to do is find the ways to bridge that gap with, hey, yeah, we understand that each one of these assets operates on its own, but so do franchises. So if I'm on a franchise, yes, every one of them is a different ownership group, but they're all under Dairy Queen or McDonald's or whatever it is, and they're all benefiting from that centralized marketing approach.
Yeah, I think budget and the admin associated with it is definitely a big one that I've heard. Obviously, like you have more experience with this than I do, but in the limited times that I've brought this up, how are we supposed to get this $4,000 a month property budget into a pool? And let's say I'm third party, how does that owner know that we're actually using their budget on their property? Because they're going to be like, wait, that every single dollar that Google Ads campaign has to come back to me. And like, that's a big one. I mean, it's not small. It's a pretty big operational thing to figure out how you're going to track budget, because budgets cause so much operational burden in general, just managing them and staying on top of them, staying on top of them. So when you start pooling your resources, it gets tricky. Do you have any hacks for that?
So Ed and Mr. Owner, I understand and I appreciate what you're saying, and I think that that's a real concern. What we've seen is that when we can pool those dollars together and we can do a sister property co-marketing approach here, it's actually not $4,000 that I need you to spend. It's actually $3,400, and that continues to improve as we get better at this. And so what we're going to do is take that marketing budget that we put in, and we are going to put it into curb appeal or property improvements or more resident events or retention and things that continue to improve your overall marketing and improve your overall NOI. I don't need as much if I'm not competing against my other properties. And that's what we see, right? We did an analysis of this for a client in the Denver market. They have 10 properties in the market, and they had 10 different PPC campaigns going. And 60% of the keywords, at least 4 properties were bidding on the same keywords. And so they were competing against themselves and driving prices up. And you're also competing against everybody else. But the minute that you can go to, hey, I'm going to split some of that budget out and I'm going to do some property specific marketing, because we know that people still search for us by name. And we're also going to do some regional marketing. We're going to do some brand building here. The minute we go that route and split it 60-40, let's say, we know that we're going to start to save money. And we've proven that time and time again. It's typically between 15 and 25% that we can cut off of a marketing budget once we take this approach.
I think that's a great call. And I'm going to take my own advice for a second, because on a previous podcast with Bobby Stewart, actually, we talked about starting with the problem before pitching the solution. And so I think a good way to test this would be to say, hey, Mr. Owner, we're currently, let's say 40% of your budget is currently being wasted because we're competing with properties in the same location. What are we supposed to do about that? We have to fight so hard for every dollar. So what are we supposed to do about it? We only have $4,000 to spend. We cannot be wasting this much. We need it to be working for us. And right now we're wasting it. So what are we supposed to do about it? And it goes, oh, well, actually, here's a few solutions. We could keep doing the same thing, which we really don't want to do because every dollar is so precious. We're not working with $1 million a month here.
Right.
We could pool it, gear it more towards the user journey and how they shop, and make sure that we're not actually driving up our own cost per click. If artificial competitors are driving up your cost per click, that's just torture. If you know anything about how the Google Ads auction works, driving up your own cost per click is like the most miserable thing you can do, because they're already doing it for you. So playing any part of that game is not going to be fun. So I think, just starting with the problem and framing the problem is obviously going to be half the battle, because they want to solve problems. Like if you're in third party, they hired you to solve problems.
And listen, they want to feel the love, right? And if you take this to its end of how does this play out across an entire marketing strategy, then you are looking at, hey, if you need help, here's what we have available to do a little bit of extra merchandising of your property and those stale units on our website. Here's what we do with our email marketing to make sure that if you have a focus property, that we can put more attention to that focus property or those units. Here's what we do to take our resident feedback and our reviews, and we pull the unique selling points out of those things so that we can really highlight, here's how we call out the best things about living at your property. It's not just Google Ads and ILSs and those kinds of things. It's like, how does all of that tie together with everything else that we do? And that's why you're hiring us to do the marketing for you, is because we think about all of this.
Right. And obviously, when someone allocates a marketing budget, they want it to be spent on their property. But I think more importantly, what they're looking for is the end result, which is actually the traffic and the attention. So if you can solve for traffic and attention, it's not as important what dollar goes exactly where. It's important that it's going to result in traffic and attention. So if you like frame that problem, show them that you have a very well thought out solution that is the best option, I think you should be good to go. And as long as the owner's like a little bit more open minded and forward thinking, like, or leadership in general, I think you'll be able to pull it off. But, you know, overhauling your marketing to centralize it can feel like, you know, climbing a mountain. What would you say is the first step if you could only do one thing to move towards a centralized marketing strategy? What would be the first thing that you would do? Because obviously there's a long list to do the whole thing, but where would you be able to start?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's actually two that come to mind, and if I had to pick one, I would probably start with email marketing because I think that that's underrated and underleveraged by a lot of folks in this industry. But I do see that corporate websites are usually also underleveraged and underutilized. But corporate websites are the best place to be a really good answer to somebody's question when they don't know what they're looking for, right? Those questions of, you know, I'm looking for best apartments near Columbus, or I need all utilities included, or I need pet friendly. If you have multiple options within your portfolio, then start building out content there that answers those questions, and have the landing page of pet friendly apartments in Uptown Dallas. And you've got, you know, 4 properties that you feature there. That's a better answer for search. It's a better answer for AI, and it's a better answer for a click through on a Google ad. So we see that that's a really good starting point, is just start thinking about answering those questions on your corporate website. If you can't do that, if that's not an option, or if that's just, you know, too much to take on right now, then just start putting together lists, you know, start pooling together email of prospects, you know, build an audience for each property and then combine them all together, and take that same list of, here are my 4 properties. I'm going to start emailing all of the prospects for everybody who said that they're interested in Uptown Dallas. And I'm going to say, hey, if you're still interested, here's some of our best one bedroom deals this week. And I'm just going to point them to the units that need featured. But like, there's literally almost no cost to send that email, but it's a really easy way to start without adding new tools and layering on a bunch of different things.
Right. So the corporate site strategy is better geared towards the top of that funnel. But if you've already gotten that lead and you want a little bit lower hanging fruit, you're saying email is going to make a little bit more sense. It's just easier to start. It's like a lower lift, and you've already gotten the lead. So you're kind of course correcting and saying, hey, I know this property might not be the perfect fit for you, but we have more options, and let me allow you to shop the way that you want to with options.
Yeah.
So I'm glad you brought up AI as well, because since AI overviews have launched, and obviously the whole shakeup with how people are changing how they shop, and the top of funnel getting shorter because it's easier to get the answer you want faster. One trend really stuck out in all the research that has been done on which sites get featured in AI overviews, which is now the holy grail, and 90+% of all the Google search attention is AI overviews. So we're all trying to figure out, how do you get in there? A really big reason to shift is that a property website will probably almost never get featured in an AI overview because their domain authority, which is like a Google reputation score, is too low. And an individual property, even probably the biggest property in the US, right, is probably not going to have the budget to make it worth it to increase their domain authority to get featured in an AI overview. So, but that being said, a corporate site, if you've got 20 properties and you pool all their resources together, you could get your corporate site to a domain authority ranking that would get featured in AI overview and actually make economical sense given your marketing budget and the time and resources put in. So not only would you be gearing, aligning your marketing to the user journey and how people actually want to rent apartments, but you're going to make yourself more AI friendly or future proof your organic search strategy, because that is what AI overviews are favoring, are the highest domain authority sites, which individual property journeys are, I think, almost, I don't want to say never, but almost, they will almost never be featured in there.
I mean, they're almost never featured in organic search,
right?
Period, for unbranded terms, right? So yeah, it's the same thing. What we see, what's interesting is that Google right now is trying to figure out how to balance their products, right? Because they're trying AI overviews. What we see in a lot of cases, though, is that those aren't showing up as much for local searches because Google's still trying to put Google Maps and the local pack up there too, right? And so they're trying to figure out the balance. Sometimes you get it, sometimes you don't. So, but yes, absolutely, we definitely see that it's easier to build domain authority, and we could talk about corporate website versus individual property websites. There's an answer there. There's a data backed answer for what you should do. But it's easier to answer the question when people have those kinds of searches, unbranded, best pet friendly apartments in XYZ neighborhood. You have to think about intent, and you have to think about what are they looking for. They're not ready yet to see one property. They want to see what are my options. And the corporate website, not only is it higher domain authority, but it's always going to have better options because you can show multiple things. And there's a lot of, if you really get into the weeds and you look at what the ILSs are doing, there's a lot of tactics that you can steal from ILSs and start to incorporate into your corporate website. And you're going to see amazing results. And what we've seen is that it helps with Google Organic. It helps with Google AI overviews. It also helps with things like ChatGPT and Perplexity for those folks that are completely leaving Google for those types of searches.
And I don't have the data to back this, but let's say you're running an individual property strategy. Google paid is still considered a top of funnel marketing source, right? It's like between top to middle, I would say. It's like moving from the top to the middle. And what percentage of your conversions are going to be a fully booked tour? There's no way it's going to be above 10%, right? Like, why is it mostly phone calls and form submissions? Because they, like you just said, they're not ready to book a tour yet. So you're trying to take them on this individual property journey and you wanted them to book that tour. Of course, that's the next step we want them to take, but they're not at that stage yet. I would imagine, and we should run the number, we should find a way to track the numbers for this, is if you switch from the individual property strategy to the pooled corporate neighborhood page strategy, you could actually get a higher percentage of the conversions that you want because you're moving them through those stages faster on your terms. I'm sure that you would get a higher percentage of scheduled tour conversions if you just gave them those options and you kind of track that journey because you're allowing them to move through the phases of the funnel instead of trying to force them onto one property's funnel.
This was a big thing for us when we were developing our website product, RentPress, is just understanding how to give people multiple options based on where they're at in the process. And you do that on a corporate website. You even do that when people are looking at individual floor plans on a single property website. There's ways to give people multiple options of what to do. And what we see is that when you do that effectively, you more than double your website conversion rates without doing anything else. And in doing so, when Google sees that people are more likely to engage on the website, more likely to convert, it ends up helping with organic traffic, and it helps with PPC conversions and quality scores and those kinds of things, right? But we 100%, like, let's go back to that example that I shared about the regional landing page that's talking, has 4 different options. If somebody clicks through and they see what they like with a property, then you give them the option to book a tour, you give them the option to ask a question, you give them the option to start an application. If we see that people are browsing between properties and they're not sure, then that becomes an opportunity to then interject with maybe a smart pop-up or something that says, hey, looks like you might need some help. Can we have a neighborhood specialist reach out to you? And then you collect the name and maybe like how many bedrooms and a move-in date. You already know what page of the website they're on and what they've seen before. So you have some context to then have that conversation to start nurturing them. In a lot of cases, like, most people aren't even giving that option to collect that lead at that point. And go back to what we talked about earlier with software, CRMs can't accept that lead. So you have to make sure that you have systems in place to go, okay, if this person comes in and we know that they want Uptown Dallas, but they don't pick a property, how do we talk to them? Those are things that are really easy to overcome if you just sit down and have the conversation with the marketer and go, how do we want to handle this? But if you're not thinking about it and you're only relying on what can my property management software do today, you're going to totally miss that opportunity to capture those leads.
So this brings about like speaking of user journeys, right? Obviously they want options, they want to go on their own terms. Do you think that with all the new AI products that are coming out, they're allowing you to ask a better question? I mean, you brought up an example, pet-friendly apartments in Dallas. It's a pretty specific search. And
Mhm.
I don't think 6+ months ago, I don't think renters were as confident making those kinds of searches because what happened when they made them? They didn't find the properties they were looking for, right? The technology available didn't actually point them to those properties yet. Now, there's a few awesome products. We could talk about sunny.com another time if you've checked it out. But you can ask a ridiculously specific question and
Yep.
get that result and be happy with it, which is a major improvement from where we were at a year ago. So do you think, so now when we're thinking about the top of funnel, let's say you're assuming that your renter is going to consider 5 to 10 properties or 3 to 10 properties or whatever it might be. Mike, do you think that they're going to consider a fewer number of properties in that top of funnel stage because they're just asking better questions? Because that could totally change top of funnel behavior if
All
they're not
right.
going to consider as many as they did before.
So two different things. One, we've definitely seen there's a, I don't know, what's interesting is that the length of the funnel and what it looks like is different based on the class of the property. We've confirmed this. We've seen that some other folks have done some research, but typically the nicer the property, the longer people take to make a decision. That tends to be the trend. What we see though is it's harder today to compel people to get up off the couch. That is what we've seen before. And people, you think about, years ago, people would go to the grocery store and grab the guide, and then they'd drive around the neighborhood and go see a couple of properties on a Saturday morning. That's now it's, I'm going to do a lot of research and I'm going to see what I can find, and I'm going to really know what I'm getting myself into before I raise my hand and say, yes, I want to go tour this place. And even then, it's still pretty hard to get people in the door after that. But I do think that it's harder to compel people to come take a tour. They're not going to do that as often, and they're not going to do that for as many properties, for sure. I want to go back to what you just said about the AI stuff, though, and the ability to answer more specific questions. We have to think about, where are those tools? It doesn't matter what the tool is. Where are those tools getting their answers? And this is a really tough one, especially when you think about the bandwidth that you brought up earlier. Content is more important than ever. Having content and understanding what questions your customers have and how to answer them in a way that's interesting and compelling. Content is more important than ever because there's more ways to go search, but all of those places are looking for, and they're all being trained off of content. So if you're not creating the content out there to go, hey, here's why we are the best pet-friendly apartments in Uptown Dallas, you're not giving yourself the opportunity to show up in Google or in Sunny or in ChatGPT or anywhere else. So we really have to be thinking about, like, how do you feed the machine so that you show up wherever those people are doing their search?
I think a good exercise. So just to illustrate how user behavior is changing, people were hardly confident searching pet-friendly apartments. Now you're probably going to see things like, I have a 60-pound Labrador and I need to move in at this date and I need a balcony, and they're going to put all of that in the search, and they're going to expect to get a result that fits all of those criteria. So if your website doesn't answer pretty much any question you've gotten from a prospect, then you're in trouble, because those AI results don't want to give low confidence answers. They're not going to give you, oh, go try this property, see if they can take your Labrador. No. They're going to give you the properties that have invested in the content to make it explicit exactly what their policy is, so they can match it perfectly. Because AI is actually so good at it. If you give it the content, it barely misses when it comes to that kind of thing, if you actually given it the content. So I think a good rule of thumb is, see if you can answer every question you've gotten just by your content property website alone.
I literally just had this conversation with our account managers at 30 Lines yesterday. A question that I have our team ask our clients is, what are the questions that your leasing team is getting? Let's go through all of your surveys. Let's go through call transcripts. Let's go through contact forms and chatbot records, and let's look at what are the questions that people are asking and how do we go through and answer every one of them. And that content goes on your website, and there's specific formatting that you can put on your website to make those more visible as FAQs. That goes in your Google Business, that goes in emails, that's your short form video content strategy, is just go through and start answering some of those. But like every one of those things, you have all of that data today. And this is, AI as a from the bandwidth side, it's great that I can just feed it, hey, here are these call transcripts, tell me what questions people have, and then just give me the list. And now I can prioritize those and start answering those, chipping away at answering those questions. But it's so important to look at that. You don't have to do it every month, but at least, once a quarter, a couple of times a year, have that review process of what are people asking and are we answering that question?
Yeah, that's a great call. Also, it gives you more clarity as to what kind of content you should create. I think that's been a big issue. It's been like, oh, like we need to create content, but what am I going to write about, right? Like how many times can I post about our pool and our leasing staff, right? But this gives you clarity. It's like, no, your prospects are telling you exactly what they want you to create content about. And what's great is if you pull this off, the leads that you do get from the AI search results, they'll actually book that tour, right? Yep. They've moved through the funnel. They're actually moved from top to middle, closer to bottom now, because they've progressed so quickly through the journey. And that's what everyone needs to be looking at, is they're flying through the top of funnel now with these AI products. If you can ask that question, instead of spending an hour looking at 10 different sites and trying to answer it yourself, or by calling and texting and emailing, AI just answered it for you in like 30 seconds. You're just moving on to the next stage. Like we have a destination, right?
So, and I think here's the challenge for us right now, and this is, I think there's lots of ways to solve for it, but search as a behavior is not going anywhere, but search as a destination is more fragmented than ever, right?
Yeah.
And what's interesting is that Google's not really losing ground. It's just that people are also looking in other places. If you look at the number of Google searches that are happening, they're not losing ground. It's not declining. It's actually pretty steady and still climbing a little bit. But people are also looking on Reddit. They're also looking on TikTok. They're also looking on ChatGPT. And they're just, like I said, they're doing more research, and it depends on who the user is, but you really have to be thinking about how do I answer those questions? And, something we were talking about before we hit record is like, how do I answer those questions in a way so that I can create once and repurpose it and have it for 5 or 6 different channels?
Yeah, for sure. And, we've covered some like mid to low hanging fruit when it comes to switching to this strategy. I'm just curious, is there any other big objections that people have told you as to why they aren't successfully able to switch to centralized marketing?
I'm sure that there are. I think that it just is uncomfortable to try something new, right? Like there's risk involved. There's risk involved in taking a totally new approach. We've done this enough that we see that the data plays out, and we know that we can reduce total marketing costs per door if you combine forces and have sister properties working together. We know that to be true. It works even better if you have a parent brand that people recognize and trust. Folks, lots of folks recognize Camden, they recognize Amley, they recognize Cortland. That benefits. They recognize Mark Taylor. Mark Taylor's done an amazing job with this. Mm-hmm. And it's like, once you've done that, now all of a sudden, as soon as I see, oh, this property is a Mark Taylor property, there's a certain element of trust there that property benefits from that other properties don't, because they're starting from scratch. Their owner said, hey, this is a unique snowflake and I need to be treated treated with my own thing. And I don't think people realize how much ground they've lost already when they don't leverage sister properties and the parent brand.
Well, that brings about a great conversation about bandwidth, because I would say most of the people I talk to say, I don't have time to be proactive here. I'm 110% spent on just keeping up with all of the inbound requests, all the demands of my job. And the problem is also the solution, in the sense that you're 110% covered, and you don't have any extra space to do a new project like this, for example. But you'll never get out of that cycle if you don't create a new infrastructure for how you manage marketing. One of our clients, without my help at all, just decided to move to the corporate strategy and put everything on one domain. And she told me she doesn't get stressed out by new acquisitions anymore. She said the website used to take a week and it takes like half a day now, and it's incredible, right?
Yep.
So it's like you have that problem. You kind of have to expend yourself more to prevent it in the future and break the cycle, which is very, very hard to do. If you're a one-person marketing team, even harder. Our hearts go out to you, right? But I feel like the problem is in the solution. Like, you have a bandwidth problem, but to solve it, you need to expend yourself more.
Yeah, I mean, listen, there's a whole conversation that we need to have about like what reports are people being asked to create, and all of the different things. I mean, listen, we work with some restaurant clients. I've got one restaurant client in particular. They have got 3 people in the marketing team that the only thing they do is focus on breakfast, right? And it's like one brand, you have one day part that you're focused on, and that's all they take care of, versus our industry where, it's not uncommon for me to work with a 3-person team that's responsible for 80 separate properties, plus the corporate, plus the owner's foundation that he's involved in. And and they have a construction company, right? And it's like that marketing team is handling all of that stuff, and all of them are separate brands. And it's no wonder that people go to take the path of least resistance and take the template websites and take the ILS contracts and those kinds of things, because there's no risk, and I can just say fine, it's done. I can check the box. What we see though is, if you can start to shift a little by little, it's amazing, one, that your life doesn't get that much harder. There are ways to take work off of your plate here and have things ready to go, like you said, plug and play for the next one, which is huge. And you're far better equipped to show value and show the impact of what marketing is doing for the organization, and make sure that you have a seat at the table, so that they understand what you do and how you add value.
For sure. And I think, back to your example with the email marketing, let's say you don't have time to transition to this, top of funnel, more user-led journey. With email marketing, it's low-hanging fruit. It's not going to be hard to get budget for that. It's not that expensive. And you're just course correcting. You're saying, okay, maybe we led you down a single property journey, but we know that you're in this journey to consider more properties, and you're not just going to look at one property. So why don't we help you after the fact? Not as ideal, but with our given bandwidth, we can do that right now. So why don't we just start there? I think it's a perfect example. Like, just take the first step, make all of your marketing spend more efficient, make your user happier, because you know that they're looking at more than one property when they're looking for an apartment. It's like, when you're looking at apartments, like the most important decision of the year, like where I'm going to live. Are you kidding me? It's got to be great. I have to love it. It has to really work out. I can't mess this decision up. Otherwise, I'll really pay for it.
And listen, there's so many opportunities with nurturing in general, right? But I think I love the leasing assistants and the scheduling tools that are available and the chatbots. There's some pretty incredible technology out there that has really helped move the needle on increasing conversions once we have a lead in the door. Where we tend to see that the ball gets dropped is in some of that storytelling that you just talked about, of staying top of mind, staying top of inbox, staying, in somebody's texts, if it makes sense, where to say, here's why you want to live with us. Here's why other people love living here. And oh, by the way, if we're not a good fit, here are 3 other properties sister properties that we want you to go check out. But like, there's a lot of opportunity for us to incorporate, what are our unique selling points? Hey, here's why your pet's going to love living here. Here's how we approach wellness. Here's, like, people love our maintenance team, and here's all the testimonials that we have that show that. Like, those kinds of things. I think in a lot of cases we think about like, let's do the marketing, let's get the lead, and then the only focus is on get the tour, get the application. And we're not really doing enough to continue to tell the story of why are people going to love living here.
So if I'm understanding you correctly, when we get leads, we might be assuming that they're hotter than they actually are, right? Because we've led them down this single property journey. So let's say the lead might just be a little bit warm, right? And with nurturing, you can get them to hot, and you can actually make them choose you if you do the right kind of nurture by tailoring to them and giving them that social proof. Here's what our residents love. Our maintenance team responds within a day, max, all that kind of stuff. And
Yep.
But oftentimes you see like, okay, you got 100 leads and leasing tells you, oh, these people didn't respond. And
Yep.
the nurturing is why, the lack of nurture is why they didn't respond. You didn't
All
help
they-
them move forward in the journey. So
all
they
they
weren't that
got
hot. You
was-
assumed they were hot.
All they got was an email that said, "Hey, I saw you're looking for a 2-bedroom. We'd love if you want, please come in, check our availability at our website." And they literally just came from your website. But like that's the kind of email that we see go out. Or hey, I'm just checking in. Are you still interested? Right? Like there's nothing compelling about that that's going to move people forward. If you can continue to sell, go on. If you want a good example, politics aside, if you want a good example, go look at a Tesla on their website and sign up for the Tesla news. You say you're interested in the Tesla and just watch the lead nurturing that they do, because they take individual features of the vehicle and they email you about, hey, here's why you're going to love, the battery range, whatever it is. But every one of those is a separate email that they continue to keep in front of you. What we see with nurturing, with storytelling focused nurturing, is it does exactly what you just said. It warms up that lead, heats up that lead, and by the time that they walk in the door, they're pre-sold. You are going to see a big difference. And what's interesting is you have to think about what do I consider to be metrics for success. But if you take that path, by the time they walk in the door, your leasing team is much more likely to close that person because they've already seen enough. They're convinced. They just want to know that your leasing team is competent. And yes, what I see confirms what I saw in my inbox.
And the status quo is a very frustrating cycle because you ask leasing, why didn't these people respond? It's like, I don't know. I called and I texted. I sent them an email. I called them. Like they just didn't respond. And you're like, we're generating these leads. Why aren't they converting? Something's wrong. And I think the answer really is, if you take a note from Tesla, when you submit that contact form on the Tesla site, they're not assuming you're at 100% demand. They're like, listen, this is a $60,000 car. This person didn't just submit a contact form and they're going to buy it. They're, let's say, at 20%, 30%, 40%. Let's ramp them up to 100% and let's get them to where we want them to go. And at 100%, they'll be ready to buy the car. Right now, they just think Tesla's cool. Their friends have one. They like the features. They have some subtle interest. Let's increase that interest. Let's bump that up. And they will be ready to buy that $60,000 car at the end of it. I think we assume 100% demand of all the leads that come in. It's like, why? Well, they raised their hand at our property. Why wouldn't they? So when leasing reaches out and they don't respond, everyone kind of points fingers at each other. But in reality, we're just not taking them past 20 to 30% demand. They raise their hand, but they're not really willing to move forward. You didn't give them a reason to.
Well, you take that, it's always been leads, drive more. We need more traffic. And then there's also, you layer on all of the complexity of fair housing and hey, we have to treat everybody the same. And you end up with this, like, every lead, it doesn't matter if they're at 10% or 100%, we treat them the same. And that just doesn't make sense, right? So we can say, hey, everybody who's at 10%, we treat them the same. Everybody who's at 50%, we treat them the same. I am satisfying everything I need to satisfy for fair housing. And I'm taking a much smarter approach to warm those people up and not overwhelm my leasing teams with 100 leads that they shouldn't be talking to.
I think my takeaway from this conversation is, okay, I might not have the bandwidth for centralized marketing, but email nurture is such a low hanging fruit that I just need to start doing it, because it's not going to be hard to get budget for it. We just I hope Mike and I just proved to you why it aligns with the resident journey and why it's worth it. I mean, when $1 billion company is doing something, it's pretty safe to copy it also. just for reference. Like you said about copying some of the ILSs, it's like, oh, we don't have enough traffic for A/B testing. Well, Zillow spent $10 million on it last year, so just copy what they're doing.
I'll give you a really quick, like very specific example for our industry. We spend so much on all of the amenities, digital or physical. We invest so much time and effort and money in these amazing amenities that, like, in a lot of cases, renting is a better experience than owning a home, just because there's so much available at the properties that we've developed. And then if you look at the website, it's a bullet point on the amenities page. Hey, here's our wellness room. Here's our Zen room. Here's our rooftop deck. And there's one picture and a bullet point. Does that do your investment justice? And what we look at is, how do we extract that bullet point and expand on it and show that next person, here's why you are going to love this when you choose to live with us. And that alone, that one bullet point, becomes an entire story. And, you know, to your point earlier, it's email. It's not just email. It's also social and a number of other things. But like, we have to do more to showcase the benefits that we've invested in through the amenities and through the programming and through what we've done in our properties. And, you know, we see that that's a massive opportunity to really expand on that. What are the benefits? What's the experience going to look like?
And I'll cap it off just because it confirms what you said from a different podcast I listened to this morning. Alex Hormozy, big business guy. A lot of people have consumed his content. I think he spends like $4 million a year on content. So odds are someone here has listened to him. And he said, we're so focused on the next shiny object, we forget that we should 10x what is already working. And that's pretty much what you just said. You already got the lead. You already built the amenity. You already did it. You're trying to figure out if this new video marketing strategy, this new whatever you call it, AI, whatever, is going to work. Why don't you just have you 10x what's already working for you? Because so much is already working for you. But I think that's a good place to put a pin in it. I hope that resonates. Mike, thank you so much for blessing us with your knowledge. It's been a really fun conversation.
Hey, thank you. Appreciate it.
Thanks so much for tuning into this week's episode of Building Blocks. I hope you found some value in the conversation. If you want to get updated every time a new episode drops, feel free to follow me on LinkedIn at @enchai, or just head over to our website, getflare.io, and subscribe. You'll see our newsletter there as well. That's all for today. I'll catch you next time.